All right, I'm joined now by Joe Everett of NFL Draft Bible for the Week 15 Westgate SuperContest selection segment. Joe, how's it going today, man?
Hanging in there. Starting to figure a few things in the NFL out, but just kind of sad it's already Week 15. I wish it was Week 5.
Yeah, right? Well, better late than never, I guess. And I'm 8-2 here over the last 2 weeks with my Bang the Book podcast SuperContest picks, so that's why I've forced Joe back onto the show here against his will. At least that's what I'm going to say. I don't know. Maybe he's happy to join me here. But I'm now 36-34 on the season with those back-to-back 4-1 weeks. My boss still holds site bragging rights by half of 36-33-1. He went 3-2 last week. So, we'll see. That's pretty much all the drama that we've got going on here with regards to the Super Contest. However, the mini contest starts this week. For those that are unaware, the mini contest is a 3-week sprint. Best record over the last 3 weeks winds up with $15,000 cash. Obviously, you might have to split that if somebody matches the same record as you. I believe it's been at least 13-2 every year that we've been in it, and I think some years it's also been 14-1. I don't think anyone's ever gone 15-0, so maybe that's something for me to shoot for here this year. But this will bring back some of the people that have stopped making picks to the field, at least for 1 week. If they come back and go 2-3 or something like that, they'll ride on off into the sunset for the 2017 Super Contest. But that's of particular interest because we've had 4 straight weeks in the Super Contest here north of 53%. Last week, 54.39%. Now 50.25% for the season. That's a very, very large sample size of games. I think it's over 160,000 picks or something like that. So, good for the field to get over 50% here. Super Contest Gold also over 50%, 50.55% for the season, 56.36% in the Gold. And Joe, I know you mentioned that you've kind of been coming around a little bit on the NFL here, doing a little bit better with your personal selections. Super Contest, 4 straight weeks, over 53%. Seems like after some of the crazy things we had in the middle of the season, we're kind of back to status quo a little bit, and we're all starting to figure this thing out.
Yeah, some things are just making a little bit more sense, and it isn't just a matter of like, oh, well, it's favorites winning or it's all these dogs starting to cover the number. It's just not only good teams kind of rising above the fray there, it's just situations being really loud and clear, I think, this last week. Boy, that snow game, man, if you didn't jump on that under when you saw the pictures on Twitter, I mean, shame on you. That was one of my favorites all season long. I mean, there was just, I think there's a lot of angles that are, like I said, just kind of pointing themselves out at this juncture.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the equation for me, too, because I like to do a lot of situational handicapping. I mean, in college football, I feel like because I've got the power ratings, it's something where I can get some edges with that. And then obviously in Major League Baseball, I use the analytics to my advantage. But when it comes to the NFL, NBA, NHL, it's a lot of situational handicapping for me. And a lot of those situations, early on and then especially throughout the middle of the season just weren't working out for me. Well, now they're starting to work out. They're starting to come to fruition, like you just said. And that's probably the driving force behind why I've been doing better here over the last few weeks worth of games. So, again, hopefully that can continue here because there are a lot of situational angles to focus on over these last 3 weeks of the season. One thing I've been updating here throughout the year, the consensus difference between the Gold and the traditional with the specific sides there, those games 38, 32, and 4 to the Gold side. Traditional consensus 95, 105, and 6, 47.5%. Top 5 consensus checking in here at 34 and 36. In the Gold, the consensus could go over 500 this week. It's at 98, 99, and 6, 49.75%. Top 5, 35, 34, and 1. But, Joe, I will say this, 2,748 entrants this year, record high for the Super Contest. I presume it will surpass that next year, although maybe it could fall somewhere between 2016 and 2017 from an entry standpoint, especially with the Super Contest Gold here this year, the $5,000 buy-in with the winner-take-all. But the cutoff for the money right now out of 2,748 entrants is above 62%. I think it's 62.3%. which is one hell of an NFL year, and it is tough to cash in this thing. It's 62%.
Yeah, and I think that's the final cumulative numbers I would guess stacking up because, like, I can't be alone. I know you didn't come out of the gates blazing, 6 shooters firing. I think a lot of people started the year off a little slow too, and that's got to be factored in that number.
All right, well, let's look here at this Week 15 card. It's a very spread out card. You've got some reasonable numbers. You've got some very, very big lines out there. I mean, the Saints are a 15.5-point favorite taking on Bryce Petty and the Jets. You've got the Vikings laying double digits. You've got the Jaguars laying double digits. You've got another game over a touchdown with the Eagles and the Giants. But a lot of other games pretty reasonable out there. Joe, overall impressions of the card here where, we've got 2 marquee games in the 4 o'clock time slot, much like we did last week. But I don't know. It feels to me like this week doesn't stack up to what we saw last week on the schedule.
Yeah, last week was pretty stacked. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But I still think some nice little sneaky spots, that Vikings-Bengals, I mean, you got to call that the Zimmer Bowl there. I love that little angle to play it there. And if, Aaron Rodgers is back in the fray with the Panthers, I think that's a game that all of a sudden, has so much more appeal there. And just those divisional rivalries. I mean, Chargers-Chiefs always is something I really love to get. I know we're going to break down that game too, but you have to search a little bit more for it, for the value there, and the excitement and why to watch. But it's tough. I think, like you said, last week was just that was about the best slate of games, and just a perfect Sunday to say, nope, I'm taking it off, ordering a pizza. I've got plenty of adult sodas up there, ready to go and rock last Sunday.
Now, one thing I will say here is one of the things I wrote down in my notes, and this is kind of relevant to the fact that we talk about this in bowl season, where late in the year, motivation means so much in college football. And it feels like this year in the NFL, more so than in years past, you've got some teams with some very, very questionable motivations out there, whether they're looking to improve their draft pick stock or they're just not that invested for a variety of reasons. Lame duck head coach, quarterback changes, stuff like that. So you see that a lot here late in the year. But one of the challenging things about it, Joe, is that, you mentioned this already, a lot of division games on the schedule here this week. Over the next 2 weeks, the majority of the games are going to be division rivalries. So you have some teams that have kind of been dormant here over the last few weeks with a chance to play spoiler, and that sort of adds a new wrinkle into the equation of trying to figure out, which teams have the pride, which teams have the character to step up in that type of role and maybe influence the playoff picture here.
Yeah, it's so I mean, they scheduled that change up to kind of get these rivalries out there in order to decide the divisions and maybe have those playoffs going up to advantage. But I'd say you just can't avoid it sometimes. There's some teams that fall in the tank, and maybe not necessarily in the tank. It's just like you said, that where they are, what direction they have, where that arrow is pointed. It's anybody's guessing sometimes. So that's where you have a few of these this week that it's just I'll just be staying away because you don't know how to gauge certain teams. I mean, like where that Giants team is, that's anybody's guess reading some of the quotes and what we're hearing in the news.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I've got a couple of those games here on my card where we have division rivalry games where one team has questionable motivation. And, those are factors that I tried to consider. And one of them, is that game that's kind of bordering on more pick than lean. Another one later in the card is a lean because, I'm not sure if I want to trust those teams. I'm not sure if I want to, step in front of a better team to speculate as to whether or not their opponent is going to be invested and going to actually give a full effort. So, as we go through the card here and break down some of those games, our listeners will understand more with what I'm talking about. But we'll go ahead and get into the games that I do like as plays here. 3 of those, and again, I said prior to this segment here, probably more like 3.5 that are plays that I like right now. But I'm looking at number 6 in the Super Contest rotation order here this week. That is the Kansas City Chiefs. They are a pick'em at home against the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, I love what the Chargers are doing. I was on the Chargers last week against the Redskins. I thought it was a very, very good spot for them, catching a team going cross-country. What concerns me about the Chargers here is that they're beating schmucks. They're beating schlubs right now. 6 for 20 in the red zone the last 4 games. Again, those are games against the Bills, the Cowboys when Sean Lee was out, Ezekiel Elliott's obviously out, They had all the offensive line injuries. That was the Thanksgiving game. The Browns, who suck, and we all know that. Then the Redskins, traveling cross-country without much of a care. So the Chargers, yeah, they've won 4 in a row. They've won 7 of 8. They're playing, as well as anybody in the NFL right now. But still, that 6 for 20 in the red zone would scare the hell out of me as a Chargers backer this week. Because if you're getting 3 instead of 7 against the Chiefs, it's harder to overcome that than it is when you're playing the Bills, Cowboys, Browns, and Redskins. Also, the Chargers, they haven't faced a real offense since before the bye. Maybe the Jacksonville Jaguars, but again, as we know about Jacksonville, with Blake Bortles, it's kind of hit or miss with what their passing game looks like. The biggest thing for me about this game, though, is that you've got the Chiefs at home, division game, massive game for first place, in the AFC West. Home field advantage at Arrowhead is easily 3 points to me in this spot. The Chiefs were minus 2.5 in Los Angeles earlier on this season. So what this line is telling us this week is that the Chargers are minus 3 on a neutral, probably minus 5-ish at home because, they don't have a full 3-point home field advantage, maybe minus 4.5 in LA. I don't buy that at all. I say hell no to that. Give me Kansas City here at home in a game that they really, really need, and the fans are going to show up and support them. And also, too, the Chiefs, 10 yards per play against the Jets, moved it with ease last week against Oakland. I think that whatever they ran into in the middle of the season is behind them, and they're ready to go now and finish this thing out strong.
It's fair enough. I think the big thing there is the play calling switch up, and finally, Andy Reid delegating, and that really, from what we've seen on the field, that I have to credit that to kind of their turnaround and this, like you mentioned, the yards per play. And yeah, I think the Chargers are so hot right now. They're getting that public love, and it's hard not to love what Keenan Allen's doing, Phillip Rivers balling. But the last time these two teams played, I think Rivers threw 3 interceptions because he's my fantasy quarterback. Got that one indented in the memory there. So I don't think he's going to do that again. I look at a high-scoring game here, but yeah, home field advantage. I think the Chiefs have something figured out here, and if it really does come to a shootout, I think Kansas City might end up with a few more points here. I don't know if I'd be jumping on this game, but yeah, forced to pick a side. Tough not to go with Arrowhead support, and that's Travis Kelce, a little too much Tyreek Hill, and Kareem Hunt finally turning things around, looking a little bit like the back we saw at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and like I said, with the Chiefs being 2.5-point favorites against the Chargers earlier on in the year, I understand that was a long time ago, and I understand that these are two different teams from that point. But if you look at that game and you sort of take the 2.5 for LA at home, and I'll give them 2.5 for the travel from Kansas City out to Los Angeles, then Kansas City would be a 5-point favorite on a neutral. And right now the Chargers are a 3-point favorite on a neutral per this line. I just don't see where anything has happened between these two teams to create an 8-point difference in this number. So I think there's some line value here on Kansas City. Also, I mentioned the teams that the Chargers have played, the Bills, Cowboys, Browns, and Redskins. None of those teams have a guy with the upside and the talent of a Marcus Peters, who's going to be on Keenan Allen in this game. Now, I know we've talked about the Chiefs and their lack of team speed and some of the issues that they have outside of Marcus Peters, but if Peters is on Keenan Allen and can hold him in check to whatever degree you can hold Keenan Allen in check to, I think this is kind of a game where the Chargers, schematically from an X's and O's standpoint, this is easily the worst that they match up with any of their last, 5 opponents. So I do worry a little bit about that offense here with Keenan Allen finally facing a guy that can hang with him.
Oh, no doubt. If Marcus Peters is playing to the best of his abilities, that's the one question mark there with the suspension and, where his head's been at this season. This isn't the first time he's kind of popped off when he threw that flag against the ref, but before that, I forget which team it is now. I think it was the Raiders where they had the fight on the field. Marshawn Lynch has to escort him out. Peters, there is so much talent there, but boy, is he hot-headed, and I'm just after the suspension. Hopefully, he's right. If he's upstairs, I'll check. He could definitely shut down Keenan Allen. So I think that's where you do bring up a good point. Matchup-wise, the strength versus strength. This is a team that can stop San Diego's best weapon.
Let me ask you this, because I like to try to look at all angles of the game that I possibly can. I mean, from what you know about Keenan Allen, is he a guy that can get under Marcus Peters' skin? I mean, is this a situation where, he can play some of those head games, or is he just, too soft-spoken of a guy, just kind of goes about his business and, leaves it at that?
Well, I don't know a ton about Keenan Allen. I mean, especially when, some of these underclassmen, West Coast, it's tough to get an interview with them or talk to them. But from what I've seen him in media appearances, he does strike me as a pretty cool customer. So I don't know how verbose he is on the field and where he is with the game that's played outside the game, so to speak. But I don't know that really the separation is there. And boy, when you've got two physical guys that win on contested balls, that the favorite a lot of times is that corner that has the better length. So I think that's where the matchup, just like on the field, I'd give it to 100% all systems go Marcus Peters. But yeah, as far as that, head games, that's where he is vulnerable. You can just kind of get him off his mark there for a second, and that's where some corners will struggle. But if it's just on the field, I mean, I'd have to give it to Peters as the downright better player. Even though Allen, I've watched those last 4 games. That's better footage than just about any receiver you've seen in a while.
One other consideration here, and this is something you have to look at in all of these games here in the month of December. Weather looks like it's going to be okay for this game. Temperatures in the 40s, but still, I mean, Phillip Rivers, a West Coast type of guy, maybe a little bit of a chill in the air could slow him down a little bit because, as we know, the Chargers can't run the football all that effectively. They move as Phillip Rivers moves them. So, maybe playing in the Midwest here could cool Rivers off a little bit. So we'll move on from that game here. We'll go to number 11 in the Super Contest rotation order. That's the Minnesota Vikings, who are a 10.5-point favorite against the Cincinnati Bengals, as you called it, the Mike Zimmer Bowl there in that one. To me, I know that you don't get rich laying double digits in the NFL, but I'm laying it and playing it here with Minnesota because I think the Bengals have quit. And not only have they quit, but injuries have just decimated them on defense, particularly in the back 7. Adam Jones, Sean Williams, Vontaze Burfict, Dre Kirkpatrick, Darqueze Dennard, Carlos Dunlap. Now, these are all guys that are either out for this game or listed on the injury report. Now, some of them may play, but they're not close to 100%. It's late in the season. Some of these guys are very important to the long-term health of this franchise. So if they're not fully ready to go, probably not going to get green-lighted to play. So, when you look at that, when you look at how ravaged by injuries and circumstantial things this Bengals team is, man, I just think they're in a bad, bad way here this week. I like the Vikings. I mean, I could very easily make a case for playing the Vikings, but I think the stronger case to make here is a fade of Cincinnati.
Exactly. This team's done, and I think this is the strongest look. This one, reason why I'm on the show alert, I'm tailing a lot of these picks, folks, and I think the best look you had last week was just fading that Cincinnati team, and so what if it's the Bears that's just so banged up, and I don't think much has changed. And the big injuries, you listed all the names. Burfict still in the concussion protocol. Mixon still in the concussion protocol, and those two are the real changers of that offense. I mean, you take Mixon out, that's like taking the teeth off the wolf of this offense. I mean, yes, they've got A.J. Green, and I don't have to go on about my well-known hate of Andy Dalton. I just think the problem there is on defense, you take those Burfict out, and really the underlying one, Geno Atkins, also struggling with a toe injury that he barely even played last week. He's not playing his full dose of snaps either. That's their real tone setter up front. So Carlos Dunlap and a bunch of misfits out there on defense. So, yeah, I'm going against this team every chance I get. And if it's going to be with a coach I respect a ton, then that just makes the look even better. So, yeah, the team Mike Zimmer knows. This is a strong roster against right now a team with no motivation, a lot of quit in them, and then just the MASH unit that you're going to see on defense. I think Case Keenum kind of just has his way out there.
Yeah, and Carlos Dunlap also listed on the injury report here this week. By all accounts, it looks like he's probably going to play. But still, another guy that's a very good player that's not playing at 100%. And you start talking about those guys that aren't playing at 100%, and you're running into a team like Minnesota, who's in a bounce back off a loss. They've got the chance to really put themselves in a decent playoff position if the Eagles wind up stumbling here over the last 3 weeks without Carson Wentz. Minnesota's got stuff to play for. And for Cincinnati, is it a motivating factor to play for Marvin Lewis's job? I don't know. I mean, Marvin Lewis has just kind of been hanging on to this gig, it feels like, for a while now. They haven't won a playoff game since, 91 or whatever it is, since the early 90s. So this is a team that maybe does need a change. And I know Dunlap came out in support of Marvin Lewis after last week's loss, and other players will probably do so as well. But, maybe it is just time for change there in Cincinnati. And, I think that we'll get a fairly decent read on that here over their last 3 games. And here, not only is it the injuries, not only is it a team I think has quit, I just think they're severely overmatched by Minnesota. Minnesota is so good defensively. And, there's a couple of games that are on my card here this week where I just kind of look at them and I say, how many points do I really need the favorite to get me? If Minnesota gets 17 or 20, can the Bengals get to double digits here? I don't know. I mean, without Mixon, with so much attention paid to A.J. Green, with all the injuries they've had at the tight end position, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Andy Dalton's held to single digits here. So that's another consideration with these big favorites is, how much do you actually need from them? And it's a bounce-back spot for Case Keenum and company. Mike Remmers and Pat Elflein both practicing. They missed last week's game. It just has blowout written all over it to me, and I'm not afraid to lay it here with Minnesota. And I think you brought up a really good point there, about the fact that when you are playing late in the season and you have these game-changing type guys, like a Burfict who can go out there and make you a play, like an Adam Jones who can make a special teams play, like a Joe Mixon who can make that play on offense to get you a long third down conversion or something. When you don't have those guys that create emotional lifts for you and you're playing out the string, that's a lot to overcome.
Yeah, they're just going to be playing left-handed on defense, a little bit on offense, and I love Elflein coming back. And, yeah, if there's any motivation, maybe they're playing for Marvin Jones' job, but I think even the players can sense it. There's just that, smell in the air that this is the end of the tenure. I mean, even the greatest of coaches, it all has to come to an end. Mike Shanahan at Denver, I hated to see it happen, but kind of needed to happen. Jeff Fisher in Tennessee all those years, it finally needed to, they had to make that change. And, yeah, eventually Marvin Jones, unfortunately, because the real what's too bad about it is that he's got a great little coaching tree that, just as we mentioned, Mike Zimmer's a part of. Say what you want, Hugh Jackson's a part of it. But Jay Gruden, like a lot of his assistants have gone on to do some things, and he is a great coach, a pretty neat guy to talk to in the media too. So it's just, it's unfortunate to see, but I think this is the end of the rope. And, yeah, this is just a team right now I'm so ready to get on the other side of and, open up a few bills.
All right, one more game that I'm looking at here that's most likely going to make my card. And again, I'll never play the other side of these games, but if any injury situations pop up or something like that, I reserve the right to change my mind. That's number 20 in the SuperContest rotation order. That's the Arizona Cardinals, who are catching 4 on the road against the Washington Redskins. Now, obviously, I would have loved 4.5, which is what the consensus market number is as we're recording this here on Thursday evening, but I don't think it matters. The Redskins, to me, look like a finished team. When Chris Thompson went down, we knew that was going to be a big deal for them, and it has been. Since he went down in the 3 full games that they've played, 323 yards and 17 first downs, 280 yards and 15 first downs, 201 yards and 9 first downs last week against the Chargers. They have 30 guys on their injury report over at Pro Football Reference. And a lot of those guys are done for the year already. Jordan Reed, he's already on IR. They have no chance at the playoffs. And something we talked about on Thursday's edition of the show with Rolf Michaels is, you look at Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins isn't going to mail this thing in. He's been a leader for this team since he emerged over the last 3-4 years. But if you're playing behind a severely injured offensive line with very little skill position talent, and you've got a big payday coming down the line, are you fully invested? Are you fully into this thing? Are you going to throw the football away the second someone starts to come near you? Are you going to abandon the pocket and get happy feet so you don't have to take those shots? None of those things help the Redskins. And I don't hold it against Kirk Cousins at all. I mean, dude, go out there and get your bread, man. Go get paid. But for the Redskins this year, with everything that's going on with them, the injuries and the Cousins fallout, and wondering what the future is going to look like for this team, there's just a lot of things going on behind the scenes and between the lines for the Redskins. I can't take them here in a game that really doesn't mean anything to them. If they're playing Dallas or Philadelphia with a chance to keep the Eagles from the number 1 seed or keep Dallas out of the playoffs, yeah, maybe they're a little bit more invested. Playing the Arizona Cardinals here, who, you can't play spoiler with, no motivation for the Redskins at all here. I think Arizona's easily the side.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just the line looked wrong when it opened. I mean, Kirk Cousins and this offense can't carry the whole team, especially like you mentioned. Those injuries up front, it's finally caught up with them. The situation here is going to be Chandler Jones. Who's blocking him? I don't think they have the right answer. And unfortunately, just Trent Williams, yes, he's toughed it out, and he deserves a ton of respect for playing through this injury. But, man, it's unfortunate because he's put some bad footage out there, and I love him as a player. So it's like, man, just take the last 3 weeks off. No one's going to take anything away from you. So beyond that rabbit hole, I just think Blaine Gabbert, he's going to keep him ahead of the sticks. I'm looking at kind of a low-scoring game that Arizona should win outright. Yeah, I mean, I just think wrong team favored here, and I kind of like the general direction the Cardinals are going in. That defense is still strong, and Bruce Arians, he still dials it up. They've got a deep wide receiver core, and man, it's just seeing this Redskins team fall apart has been sad because they had some great elements, and I think the guy you brought up was one of their real sparks. It just losing him, I think everyone on the team that's the real big wind out of the sails type of thing. And Chris Thompson, just like a Joe Mixon for the Bengals, like Alvin Kamara for the Saints, that same type of player that just get the ball into his hands about 5 or 6 times. One of those is going to be a 50-plus gainer. He'll find a way. And, not having that element in their offense has been so noticeable.
And I think another angle here in this game, and these are angles we can possibly explore a little bit going forward as well, is that I think the Arizona Cardinals players genuinely like playing for Bruce Arians. I mean, you've always seen them come to his defense no matter what's going on. And this is a team that disappointed last year. Went just 7-8-1, and a lot of people backed them from a season win total standpoint, backed them with some longer shot Super Bowl futures. There was kind of that vote of confidence in Arians, not just from the front office, but from the players as well. And here's another year where injuries have just really, really hurt them. But I think the guys are going to keep playing for Bruce Arians. It's unlike the situation in Cincinnati where I think with their injury problems, they're not really going out there and playing for Marvin Lewis. I think the Cardinals keep playing for Bruce Arians, so I'm not even worried about the travel because, the reason I went against one of the reasons I went against the Redskins last week is they had that cross-country trip to Los Angeles. And, who wants to do that late in the year? Maybe the players wanted to go out to L.A. and take in the sights and Hollywood and all that. If you had an Arizona team that wasn't invested in the coaching staff, wasn't invested in playing, you would never take them traveling cross-country to play an early kickoff in Washington. The weather looks like it's going to be relatively okay for this game. But still, they're a desert team and they're an indoor team. But I think there's enough respect for the people on this team and the coaching staff that I'm still willing to take the Cardinals here in this situation. And like you said, I think they even win the game outright. So I'll take the Cardinals +4 here. But, again, a lot of considerations, not just for this game, but also for all the games as we go forward. Get into my leans list here with some of the games I'm looking at. I feel like I should probably take the Baltimore Ravens just because the Browns are going to find some way not to cover that game on Sunday because it's kind of their MO now is that they're not just losing, they're also losing against the spread. And, last week might have been worse than the Lions, and the Jaguars games, right, Joe?
Oh, man, that sharp money on the Browns every week. It's just painful to watch. It's just how everything seems to melt down within their grasp. It's man, it can only mean that they're poised up for a complete turnaround. Just like the winless to close to undefeated, right? I mean, after all this bad, something good has to come out of it eventually.
There's going to be one of these years, and who knows, it could very well be next year, where the Browns all of a sudden take advantage of that built-in line value every single week, and they wind up going like 11-5 or 12-4 against the spread. It's going to happen one of these years. They'll probably go 4-12, but they'll go 12-4 against the spread or something like that. I mean, obviously it's a pretty big off season for them with the John Dorsey hiring and all that, but I'm not going to be laying a touchdown with the Ravens on the road. Their offense just isn't really good enough to do that. But I do have 3 leans here, and the one that's kind of my 3.5 play, because I'm just going to make shit up here on a Friday show, that would be number 7, the Philadelphia Eagles. They're a 7.5-point favorite against the New York Giants. And we talked about this on Monday's show, where the way that the playbook is constructed for the Eagles, with so many RPOs, those run-pass options, I think that helps Nick Foles. I think it takes some of the pressure off of Nick Foles. As long as he makes the right reads, he's going to have guys open because the skill position players for the Eagles are exceptional, and they get Zach Ertz back this week. But then they can just hand the ball off, and they've had a really good running game this year, well over 4 yards per carry. They've owned the line of scrimmage, even throughout their injuries. I think this playbook is tailored for a guy like Foles to not be a significant drop-off. I mean, he's clearly a drop-off from Carson Wentz, but I don't think it's going to be the woe is me, sky is falling type of thing that some people are expecting here, because I think Doug Peterson just has a good game plan that a lot of quarterbacks can figure out. And there's a reason that, when Doug Peterson handpicked Carson Wentz to be drafted, he was still okay with keeping Nick Foles around, because I think he feels like Nick Foles is a pretty good fit for this system. Now, again, this is one of those games where I look at this and I say, how many points do the Eagles really need to score to cover? I mean, the Giants have scored more than 20 points one time since week 7. So if I get the Eagles into the 20s, they should be in pretty decent shape here. Giants, I mean, lots of injuries for them. There's just not a whole lot going on. A house cleaning is coming. Eli Manning has one more home game on December 31st. So it's not like this is some big, rallying point for this team to win Eli's last home game or anything like that. Interim GM wants Davis Webb to play, so he probably will at some point. And this Eagles defense, which has been phenomenal throughout the season, a little bit of extra motivation for them, knowing that they don't have Carson Wentz out there. I know it's dangerous to lay more than a touchdown on the road, division rivalry with Nick Foles, but man, I have a hard time, finding reasons to take myself off this game.
And I'm not going to talk you out of it. The Doug Peterson fan club, I think, is about to get real loud after this game, because the Giants are just really, they're another banged-up team. I'll say it now, too. Landon Collins didn't practice, and if he doesn't play, he was in a walking boot after the game. That's another, we talked about, players, undercover players that I think really should be affecting lines. Landon Collins is one of the finest safeties in the league. Outside of that, a true leader, coach on the field. Like, say what you want, like a lot of these intangible things apply to Collins. He is just a great player. So, if you've got information that he doesn't play, I'm right there with you, pounding on some Eagles, because this is still a very good team, top to bottom. And right now, it's another Weston Rickberg, Justin Pugh, DJ Fluker. All these guys are out. If they get the Bobby Hart experiment back out at tackle, trying to block Brandon Graham, Vinnie Curry, Derek Barnett, that's just going to be pretty sad to watch for Giants fans. So, I'm not going to talk you out of this one at all, and I think fly Eagles fly here.
Well, and the safeties are so important in those RPOs because, are they going to come down and help out with the run? Are they going to be back in coverage? Are they covering the slot guy? Are they helping over the top? Without a guy like Collins who can read the play and then make the play. I mean, a lot of guys can read the play. They just don't have the skill set to make the play. If he's not out there, with all this skill position talent that Philadelphia has, I mean, this thing is set up for Nick Foles to have success. And maybe he doesn't right out of the chute, and maybe I look bad, playing this game. But I think that, in terms of looking at everything here, the X's and O's, the situations, all that type of stuff, I think all of it favors the Eagles so much. And again, you talk about that first game after losing a guy like Carson Wentz, and look, they did what they needed to do last week after losing Carson Wentz. knowing probably that, the on-field ACL test didn't come back with positive results, they still sacked up and won that game. And it was a tough spot. They had been out on the West Coast for, effectively 9 days with the trip to Seattle and then that game, down in Rams country. So, the Eagles are they're a tight-knit group. I think they rally around each other. I think the defense rallies. The skill position guys help out. I just think this is one of those spots where, it's Eagles or nothing, and I think I'm definitely going to be on the Eagles side here in this one. Another NFC East team that I'm looking at, number 29 in the Super Contest rotation order, the Dallas Cowboys. They're a 3-point favorite. I'm a little bit worried about how popular of this is going to be, and also the fact that it's moved from pick'em to -3 and in fairly short order here throughout the week. But, man, Joe, the Raiders they're not very good right now.
How did they not show up last week? And, yeah, I'm griping because I had the over Raiders, Chiefs. If they just, put a few points up on the board, Kansas City did their part, but that's for survival. That's for your lifeblood, and they just didn't even come to the party. So, this is not just a bad team. I think this is a completely lifeless team. Arguably their best player on offense, Amari Cooper's probably not going to play again. I mean, he hasn't been practicing. Derek Carr's playing hurt. It's so noticeable. He's not even walking right to the sidelines. So, this and the worst part is this wasteland on defense. I mean, Khalil Mack is, he's a great pass rusher, but he is one man. The rest of this, they've got no coverage players. Navarro Bowman, acquiring him, I guess that's worked out to some degree. But, this back half can be had. They can be run against, passed against, you name it. I think the Cowboys have figured out a little bit of something. And as we've talked about, their elixir, their team deodorant, whatever term you want to give them, Sean Lee's back. And if Sean Lee's back, I'm more than happy to have a Cowboys side. And at this point, there's no way you could even consider siding up with the Raiders. Just after last week was enough for me. I mean, that should be all you need to see. If they don't show up for that divisional game, then what are they going to show up for? And it's certainly not going to be this week against the Cowboys. So, I can't blame you for wanting to Dallas. And, maybe it will be a popular pick, but so what? There's nothing wrong with being in the right line.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sean Lee, I mean, he's huge. We've talked about that a lot. And I've faded the Cowboys a couple of times when Sean Lee was out of the equation. And they found something here in Rod Smith, too. And, Rod Smith has played himself into a position where when Ezekiel Elliott comes back, Rod Smith's your backup running back, and Alfred Morris may be looking for a job or maybe up in the press box. So, they've found that, too, as the offensive line has gotten healthier. Dak Prescott looks a little bit more comfortable now that the offensive line has gotten healthier. The Cowboys are, a team going in the right direction, and the Raiders just absolutely are not. One other lean that I'm looking at, and as we're talking through the Cowboys and the Eagles here, I feel like this is kind of a distant sixth lean or sixth play, I guess I should say. I could make a case for Tampa Bay plus 6.5 on Monday night. They are very bad. We talked about this situation with Dirk Cotter and Jameis Winston, and now, reports kind of circling out there. There's some friction between those two. But the thing here for me is, can Atlanta go on the road, win this Monday Night Football game comfortably, playing the Saints and the Panthers over the next two games? That's the thing that I'm worried about. Can they remain focused? Can they take care of business? The problem is they're playing Tampa Bay, who I think, has to an extent mailed this thing in for the rest of the year. Mike Evans just doesn't look all that engaged. The defense had some injuries early on in the year, and now Gerald McCoy is hurt. It's a hard play to make to take the Buccaneers. I think situationally, they are the side, and if they win this game outright or lose by a field goal, it doesn't surprise me. But I don't know if I'm willing to go that route in the Super Contest.
Yeah, it's tough. I just, the one part of that side, I don't trust the Falcons, and I've probably said that too many times on the show, but I don't care. I'll say it 10 more times. Steve Sarkisian, where he's at as a coach, is he making those adjustments specifically in the second half? If you look at some of their results, they are that first half teams. They look great. The first two quarters, that was some good ball, and then it's like a never fail. They come out of that locker room just, I don't know what they did. They just had some holiday shots or something, but that's going to be a Monday night game where I'm sure we'll get into it on Monday, but I'm so leery of the Falcons unless it's a first half, derivative kind of bet. But I can't trust the Falcons. If you want the Bucs, this could be that, what do you call the look ahead? That might be a decent play here, but I don't know. That's a tough game to pick just because of the fact of, which Atlanta team shows up.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'll say this. I mean, everybody and their brother is going to have an Atlanta teaser on Monday night, or at least Atlanta in some kind of teaser, paired with one of the Sunday games. So I'm sure that we'll be able to talk about that on Monday for our NFL Week in Review and Monday Night Football preview segment. But Joe Everett from NFL Draft Bible, at Joe W. Everett on Twitter, at NFL Draft Bible on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining me again here this week, man, and I'll talk to you again on Monday.
All right. Looking forward to it, Adam.